Well, honourable distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honour to be here with you today. If I just go like this is the thing I'm using. The first thing, I'm obligated to show you this slide. It's really all about Microsoft and education. And I think the key things to pick from this is that Microsoft have been involved in education from really 1985. There's over 500 people in the education division in Microsoft globally. I think that's the highest number of any company that's invested from IT that's invested in education. We invest about $9 billion a year in research and development. I think there's only one other company that invests more globally in research and development. And we have many, many different programs that we operate in education. Many countries here represented benefit from our Partners in Learning program. And the results of that is we train, I think something now, these numbers might be outdated, but over 20 million teachers have been trained, reaching over 200 million students. We have various programs to help university students who are young developers to learn code. And generally we have a broad skills program on how you use our technology and to try to ensure that students become more employable. So that's a little about Microsoft in education. Microsoft in Africa, we launched recently something called Microsoft for Africa. And it's really got four key things. The first one is that we want to bring millions of affordable devices into Africa for not just students, but anybody, all parts of the community to use. That's one key thing we're doing. What you can see on the slide there is the Windows Phone, which has specifically been designed for Africa at low cost. And these things are important in education, by the way, because we're currently working on an application for a program we call Learning for Life, which will enable the mobile phone to read, Literacy for Life, which will enable the phone to read the text to people, and it will actually highlight the words as they're being said from the phone. So there are useful little things here that we can do with this kind of technology. We want to bring over 1 million small businesses online in Africa, and actually train 200,000 Africans for skills for employability, so technical skills, how to use technology. And also we have something called USpark, which is really very important, not just here in Africa, but globally, because currently there are so many people that have left school or university that haven't found jobs. The unemployed youth is one of the key focus areas for us in the company right now. Now, one example of the work we do in Microsoft for Africa, which I think is very relevant for this discussion today, is something we call TV white spaces. Now, TV white spaces is really the gap between frequencies that we currently have on our TV channels. And it was designed that way originally to make sure there was no interference between the TV channels. But as it happens, as technology has moved on, that white space, those frequencies, we can actually use for broadband Wi-Fi in communities. So we've been working on some projects in Kenya and also in Tanzania, that will actually enable us to drive broadband Wi-Fi into remote villages purely by using the frequencies that typically TV channels would use. And Honourable Minister, we'd like to try and see if we can do that here in Namibia. I think it'll be a very exciting project, and we can talk about that later. But I think it's overall, it's an example of how, through Microsoft Research, who actually started building this technology, we can bring benefit really throughout all of Africa. Now, our vision in education for Microsoft is anytime, anywhere learning for all. And what we mean by that is that we see a time when everyone will learn with technology. Not only people in Africa, but also children with difficulties such as dyslexia or have impaired vision. All of these things, we believe all of these students should be able to learn with technology, everybody in the world. And that's our vision that drives us all the time. And that's how we start to build our programs and technology investments we're making to see how we can actually realise that vision. So learning very much over the years has changed. But interestingly, schools for the most part haven't changed very much. Now here is a picture of different classrooms. In fact, this really hasn't changed since the 19th century. You still have a classroom with desks, a teacher at the front teaching the students. We really haven't found any technology, even in the Industrial Revolution in the UK, and up until now, how are we driving massive change with the way we teach children? So really, education should really all be about is unlocking achievement, and the question is, are we solving for the right problems? The current learning paradigm is that you have static predetermined curriculum. I think this is common to everywhere in the world. You also have limited personalization, so in other words, every student in the class has to go at the pace of the teacher in the class. Students that struggle don't get extra time, and the gifted students aren't driven harder. There is limited learning mobility. You go to school and you learn in school. And you have very much static content. You have, physical books. It's not very dynamic content. And there really isn't any inherent motivational features for students today. And the unit of success typically is, did the student attend school that day? That's typically the universal measurement. And what I want to do here, in a second, is show you a video of the real future. This is put together in our labs at Microsoft, showing what technology would look like. It will be sometime before this lands in Africa, but knowing what's going to happen, I think, then helps us plan ahead. So if we can run the video, I'll speak a little bit more about it afterwards. Through all the different technology that you saw in there, but I'll just talk about two particular aspects. At the beginning and start of the video, you saw children looking through a screen. But in fact, they were actually looking at a screen from different countries through each other. So in other words, imagine a classroom where the whole wall is a computer screen. And in fact, when they walk up to the screen, they can interact with students in another school in the country, in the whole of Africa, or in fact anywhere in the world. And as they look through the screen, they're seeing a student on the other side. And then they can start to write on the screen, and what they're writing is actually being not only represented on the other side, but in some cases also translated in language. And this technology really exists today. In many cases it can be done, but it's expensive. And the other problem we have is that when you look at the screens, typically, for those of you doing Skype, you have a camera on your computer, it's a very static camera. What we have to try and do is put cameras in every single pixel of the screen. So as I'm looking at the screen, I'm moving along, then I'm looking directly at the person in front of me, I'm not having to look up to a camera above the screen. So this technology is being worked on now. So within the next 10 to 20 years, we will start to see very, very large screens with cameras in every single pixel in the screen, so you can start to do some of this. This will be absolutely transformational for education of children, in my opinion. Why is it important? Because we know it's expensive, you can't do this in Africa today. The design of schools. Because as you design schools, you have to start allowing for the fact that the walls actually need to be replaced by huge screens. And you can have screens in every part of the classroom. And the teachers can actually start representing their computer screens. They can start putting up work that was done last week, bringing it back when the class comes in, or they can use it in the same way you saw it on the video in terms of screens where students can interact with other students around the world. So that really will be transformational. The other thing you saw in there is on the new devices, you can see that when the child was actually representing it, she was actually projecting onto hard surfaces. So what you'll be able to do with technology in the future is you'll be able to project onto hard surfaces, and that hard surface, whether it be a table or a wall, become interactive by using a specific pen. So there's some fantastic things that we're doing in education. Now, I'll let you read this quote. I really believe in this quote, I can tell you. So, what's happened? We are now in the new era of digital learning. We really are at a tipping point for an education revolution, where technology now has become affordable enough, where broadband connectivity can be delivered, and where you have a next generation of teachers to really have a fantastic change. You have cloud computing, so schools no longer have to manage all the infrastructure for email hosting inside the school. They can manage it in the cloud. All of the publishers are providing all their content now digitally, and they're moving very aggressively. You have learning mobility with mobile devices. Governments around the world are looking at understanding that human capital is the best investment they can make. And so they need to make sure the next generation workforce have all of these key skills, these 21st century skills that employers are looking for. So we are now at the tipping point for massive change. And massive change means not just changing the technology and how it can be used, but also the curriculum. Everything needs to change. The design of schools, everything. The key drivers of technology change in the classroom are really learning beyond the classroom, mobility, personalisation, so that individual students can actually have their own personal lesson plans to be built around them that they can actually use with technology. New content dynamics, interactive content, getting points automatically for achieving something and actually having like a badge process, and developing 21st century skills, which are critical. And I'll come on to that. Now, I was in Namibia back in 2005. We were working on something called the African Pathfinder. We picked Namibia because it was small enough for us to manage it. We had about 12 schools, but they're actually on the map there. And we learned an awful lot from that. In fact, this thing here I call the 10 critical components of successful educational ICT strategy. We built it because of the learnings we had here in Namibia. And now I use this now in every government engagement I make, because what it is we say you have to do all these 10 things. I haven't got time to go through them with you now, but if you speak to anyone from Microsoft, they can explain this to you. But if some of these things aren't done, we know we will fail. It's not just about giving these devices to students and saying, off you go, you can learn the technology. You have to have a plan. Originally when I was here, we had 9. We've added one, which is really the environmental impact of technology, because all the governments around the world were talking to us about it. We knew it was becoming important. Especially disposal of old technology and how you manage it, and how you manage energy. It's very important. So I want to talk to you about the Windows tablet very briefly. I have 3 here. We believe these are critical tablets now for education because of the fact that they have longer battery life, they're much lighter to use. This is one from Acer. You can see it's a device here, it has a keyboard, but I can actually just remove the screen. I can just walk around using this tablet, pen support, so I can actually use this in the classroom, and this has 11 hours battery life, so this is quite a useful device. There's another one here from JP Saputo, who are actually at the exhibition here. This is great. This is the Millennium device. It's a convertible, so what you can do with the screen, you can turn it around, you can shut the screen up, you take out the pen, it becomes a tablet that the students can use inside the class. It also has a keyboard. This is a Microsoft Surface device. It's got a little flip screen, so you can hold it up like that. The keyboard just pulls off. All these devices now are coming, and they're becoming much more affordable. They actually start from something like $300, $350 US, and those prices are going to keep going down as technology improvements are driven. So they're very important. The other thing I'll show you, and I haven't got it with me, is Windows to Go. If you see the slide, you see the girls looking at a little memory stick there. With Windows 8, you can actually have a computer on a stick. So the students can have their own computer, but all their files, the look of the screen is exactly the same, and they can carry it around on a stick. These sticks cost currently, today, they were about $100 US, they've gone down to $50 in the last 6 months. They will continue to fall, I believe. So students, can actually go around if they have friends or uncles or family or school, they can plug it in and they have their own computer. So little things like that are really having a big difference. Okay. Here's an example of some of the applications you get on Windows 8. This is a geometry, and in fact on the Windows Store, the highest number of apps on the Windows Store today are all education. I'm not going to go through this because of time. I am going to talk to you about the fact that, remember I said that you can do a lot more in the cloud in education now. So things like email, SharePoint, how you can share files around, web apps, they're all free to education from Microsoft. You can, all these staff and students can use them for free, and we manage all the costs in the cloud. That's a dramatic change. Teacher effectiveness is really, really very important. And one thing I will pick out from this slide is, you see level 200, teaching and technology. We spent a lot of time working with UNESCO on the teacher training competency framework, and as a result of that, we've built online training for teachers for 45 hours, which they can go up, which trains teachers how to integrate technology into the curriculum. And we've built a certification program around it as well. So we now have a teacher certification program based upon online training, which is free. Now this is important. This is something driven by the University of Melbourne. It's called ATC 21S, and it's about how we have to change curriculum. And we have to start driving it to be more competency-based. So things like problem solving, teamwork, and they build a whole model of how you can start thinking about changing your curriculum. And it's so important because employers today need these skills. And I think there was some discussion yesterday in some of the speeches that reinforced this. They want different types of skills today than we typically have been teaching in schools. Here is our Partners in Learning network. We've built this. We've got over 5 million teachers globally on this now. This is a free resource for all teachers to go out and share content, share best practice, talk with each other. It's available. It's another big help, and it's growing very, very quickly in Africa. And this is my last slide, finishing time. I think all of these things, even the 10 critical components that we have, it's all about working together. So for all of our partners that we work with, the governments, we have to build a plan. And it has to be a very careful plan. Knowing where technology is coming from in the future, where we're going, how do we get there, what do we do first, and the right sequences of deployment. I think all these things are critical. And where they've been done well, we've had very successful rollouts of technology broadly, where every student uses their own device. And with that, I thank you.